Welcome to the All Creatures Podcast. This is Chris.
And I'm Angie.
And we're joined today with Rick Schwartz from the San Diego Zoo. Hey, Rick.
Hey, everybody. How's it going?
Okay. Anybody that's listened to this podcast the last, 130 episodes, Angie, knows I've beat it into the ground. The San Diego Zoo is my zoo. That is the zoo I grew up.
It's your baby. Absolutely.
It is. I mean,
rightfully so. It's an amazing place to be.
Yes. And I've got many stories to share.
And it's not just the weather. It's not just the weather makes it perfect. It's
no.
A lot of things. And Rick Schwartz is definitely one of those things.
Oh, thank you.
It's the San Diego Zoo. I mean, come on. Since I was 6 years old, trekking those hills, looking at the animals, and making me enthusiastic about what I do for the last few decades. So anytime we get to talk to anybody from the San Diego Zoo, you know I get super excited and I really get to dork out. So thank you, Rick, so much for joining us today.
You are very welcome. I appreciate you guys inviting me on. I'm very excited to do this.
Awesome. Well, thank you. And so we're just going to jump right into it. I know we've got a list of questions and, you know, it may go off script as usual. Some of these things do, but Angie and I, you know, have been really looking forward to this one. And Rick, you know, as, you know, one of the spokespeople for the San Diego Zoo, I guess it's always interesting to ask, you know, your background. Like for me, you know, this all began, like I said, when I was 6 years old, walking around the San Diego Zoo. So for you, when did all this begin, this interest in conservation and wildlife?
It stems from an innate just magnetism for animals. I cannot point to aha moment like some people can. I can't point to, oh, this happened and so then etc. I don't remember a time where I was not constantly attracted to and gravitating towards animals. Every childhood memory I may have, you know, we had dogs and cats. We had a tortoise. I remember just always wanting to be around animals. Go to a friend's house. I want to play with their pets, you know, go to a friend of the family's house. Like, oh, you got animals in the backyard. I'll be out there, you know. So I don't ever remember not wanting to be around animals. And where I grew up in a small town in eastern Washington state, we didn't have a zoo. So whenever we would travel or come down to Southern California to visit family, it was like, we have to go to whatever, there's an aquarium, a zoo, I don't care. If we're at an amusement park of some sort or somewhere that's got an animal show, we're going to go to that animal show. It had to happen. It honestly wasn't until I was in middle school that, we were doing a family tour around Southern California, so Los Angeles and San Diego area. And everywhere we'd go that had animals, my aunt and my mother were asking the people who were working with animals, how did you get this job? Because this kid needs to do this when he grows up. And I would say probably 80% of them said there's a school called Moore Park College. And, you know, most of us would go there. And so that was it. I came home from that trip in middle school, went to the school counselor and said, I need the address for Moore Park College because I need to write to find out how you get to this program. And that was really the major, like, this is where we go. Through the process of wanting to spend time with animals, falling in love with them, you know, growing up there, we didn't have the Nat Geo or Animal Planet. We had the occasional
or
documentary
magazines. I remember getting the magazines where you would get like little baseball cards of animals.
Absolutely.
We'd collect them all.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the magazines, but you know, either way, the more I fell in love and learned about these animals, and I mean, literally, it could be a newt, it could be a turtle, a tyke, the more classic lions and zebras, whatever. You cannot fall in love and learn about these animals without understanding and learning what's going on in the wild. And so that's when it was like, oh my gosh, these animals that I'm so passionate about are in huge trouble. And so that's then put me more on the course of wanting to share with others and teach others that how amazing and cool are these animals. And guess what?
Right.
They need your help. Mm-hmm. So that's sort of the condensed version of how, you know, sort of how I got on my course of initially starting off as a zookeeper and animal behaviorist, and then now finding myself as spokesperson for this wonderful organization.
Well, Rick, we have a lot of people that listen to this podcast. Some are already zookeepers, but I know there's young, budding zookeepers out there that need to know, how do you go from Moore Park or another accredited school to San Diego? Did you have stops along the way, or did you just, I mean, it's, the industry's a little different now. I know, my husband and I always talk about, we're very lucky when we got in 10 or 15 or 20 years. I can't remember how long ago. And, it has changed now a little bit. And so I just always love to hear people's advice or how they did what they did. And then if that's what the next generation should do.
Yeah, certainly, and I don't want to eat up the entire interview with just how I got started because it is a long story. But after Moore Park College, I bounced around to different jobs about every 3 to 4 years, which was just like terrifying for my family because that was, early 90s. That still wasn't quite the thing you do. Now it's a much more commonplace thing to do. To gain experience, you jump around different jobs every few years. Back then that was like, wow, but in hindsight, I'm really glad I did that because I learned so much at each job I went to. Each one was a little bit different. And I learned from my very first job that what really resonates within me and my passion lies in reconnecting people to wildlife and having those, seeing those and being part of those aha moments with an animal ambassador, to answer the questions, to then add to the information that they didn't even know they didn't know, and get them excited about conservation, etc. I learned that on my path because at some jobs, a couple of jobs, it was missing, and I was like, this doesn't resonate, and so I found that path. But as far as to go from education to profession, yes, it's different now than it was when I first started my career path. The biggest thing I can tell any student or zookeeper who's in their first couple of years that wants to look at coming to the San Diego Zoo or just making a move to any zoo, really, if that's where your passion is and you feel that that is where you need to be, then one application sent and one application denied is just simply a part of the process. It's not the end. It's not. So my personal story, I had 7.5 years of professional experience. I had Moore Park under my wings. And I applied to the San Diego Zoo thinking, this is a bird keeper position. I've worked several years with, over 100 and some odd different birds. I'm in. No. First application, got a letter back saying, thanks for your interest, but no. And then just now hit repeat about 5 times. Different jobs throughout the organization I kept applying to and getting told, nope. Finally, on my 6th application, I got an interview. Felt the interview went very well. Got a call back a little bit later. Hey, great interview. We loved you. You're our second choice. And the first choice is accepted the job. So seventh go around, I put in for a part-time keeper position. At that point in my life, I was working a job that had full-time guaranteed benefits, good job. And I was looking at one of the ways to get in sometimes was part-time to work your way up through that way. And that's what I got the part-time position.
That's how I started.
Landed in the children's zoo at that part-time position as a part-time keeper. About 6 months later, then a full-time position opened up within the department, and I was in love with the department. I mean, my gosh, it's 60 different species of animals that are mammals, birds, and reptiles. We got families coming through every day. We're working with our public relations department, working with our education department. We work with our development department. So the big part of my job was, working with those animals to get them comfortable in front of an audience, and then being in front of the audience to basically get them engaged and excited and reconnected to that wildlife that's kind of missing in our modern society. So that's kind of my story there. So yeah.
So persistence.
Yes.
I love it.
Persistence and patience. Yeah. So I always tell students, I work part-time at Moore Park also now, as an instructor. I always tell students and anybody who's in the business and ask me, I do a lot of social media as well. I always tell them, look, it's 3 P's. It's persistence, it's patience, and it's professionalism. And just rinse and repeat all 3 because, you have to be patient with the system. In our touch screen society, we are so used to immediate happenings, and there's nothing wrong with that. But you have to understand sometimes in the process of hiring or working through nonprofits or city-run zoos, it takes time. That persistence means, don't be annoying, but stay at it. Don't take a one rejection letter as you're done, no more applying. And that professionalism is recognize that when you do get that letter, stay professional about it, follow up with it, and move forward and keep at it until you can fill all of their needs. So you are so valuable, you must be hired.
Right.
Yeah. No, I mean, That's tenacity, like you said, persistence. And, for any young listener out there wanting to work with animals or wanting to do research, I know we have fans that are thinking about graduate school, and I tell Angie's story
Absolutely,
all the time, how Angie was persistent and banging on my office door.
Yeah, I look back at the emails. I'm like, gosh, I don't think I was annoying. It was just that perfect line of like, hey, I'm coming. I happen to be in Florida this week. Can you meet? That kind of thing.
Yeah, no, and it's professionalism, things like that. So, hearing Rick's story, the 7th time gets hired part-time at the San Diego Zoo, and now he's the animal ambassador. Like, come on. That is
it's
amazing.
It's a made-for-movie. Yes.
I know. That's awesome.
Yeah, and honestly, too, the internal story from the hire date of November 2000 to now, as a keeper to transitioning to spokesperson and ambassador, if you would have asked me the week before I was hired on to start being a spokesperson for the organization, like, would you ever want to leave your current role as a keeper? I would have been like, no, I'm retiring here. Mm-hmm. Because in that moment, I would have known that there's anything else out there of interest. I loved what I was doing. And even then, when I was brought in to be the spokesperson for a certain project, it was a temporary thing. I was supposed to go back to be a keeper. And so for me, it's like, yeah, I'll try it, because if it doesn't work, I don't like it. I go back to my job anyways that I love. I'm good. It was great. It was a very successful campaign. And then they asked me to come back and do it again temporarily for the following year. And then halfway through that campaign, asked me to stay on permanently as a spokesperson for the entire organization. And so it was an evolution even in and of itself. It wasn't like just someone said, hey, Rick, come do this now. And it wasn't a fast process. That's where patience and professionalism had to come in to see where this would go. So everything's a process.
Well, with that being said, so as the animal ambassador and spokesperson, what is kind of your role? If you can kind of tell our listeners what you get to do, because you're all over the place. You're doing quite a bit.
I am. Yeah. I mean, it's hard to really just, they always say, always have an elevator pitch what it is you do. And for me, I think it sounds very broad and nondescript because it kind of has to be. My job and what I do is I reconnect people with wildlife. In our modern society, I really truly believe, we have disconnected ourselves a bit, and it's no fault of our own, but there's an innate desire for us to be in nature and to be around animals. And lots of people are like, oh, I don't like dogs, or I don't like whatever. I see it every day. Even if someone doesn't like a snake and I have that snake out in the audience, people might recoil a little bit if they don't like the snake, but their interest to learn more is there. They lean in to find out the facts. I don't want to near me. You tell me all about it, but I don't want to near me. That is still there. It exists. And so my role is to reconnect. So then the subtext to that sort of my personal mission as the spokesperson for this organization, there might be a day where I'm sitting crisscross applesauce with a bunch of preschoolers, and I'll have a hedgehog, and we're talking about hedgehogs and what it is that you think they do with their nose. And then that same day or a different day in that week, I might be doing a keynote speech in front of a large group at a convention about how we work with children's hospitals in getting commercial-free educational programming into the children's hospital to distract the kids and families from what's going on in their lives in that moment. To maybe discussing in front of some PhD students why we are choosing to actively save the northern white rhino, even though there's only 2 non-breeding females left. And what does that look like in the science of it? And then everything in between. Or like earlier today, I was in the front of the zoo waiting for another crew to do an interview about our gorillas, and I was also answering questions about where the restrooms are. And so, I feel I've been with the organization long enough that San Diego Zoo and also our sister facility, the San Diego Zoo Safari Park, they're my home. I truly feel that. And I try to always welcome people to my home when they're coming to interview me, because I set sort of that sense of, you're my guest and this is where I live and I'm going to take care of you. And I know the ins and outs. I know a lot of our staff for quite a long time. And so for me, it's really just about connecting people to what we do. We are a wonderful zoo. You can come spend the day, and just walking around and having a good time. But there's a lot more there. And I think we're going to talk about some of those things today, but, it's my job to make sure people are aware of what we're doing and what that is. And for me with this organization, I'm very fortunate. That also includes, they send me all over the world. I've been to more countries than I ever dreamt I could have gone to on a zookeeper salary, because I'm being sent there for work. So, it's just a wonderful opportunity. And And for as much as it is a job, I still practice stepping back and looking at the privilege I have to do what I do and have the experiences I have, and I'm in awe of it. We do TV shows. They send me out on TV shows a lot too. It's all encompassing. And when you're in charge of telling the story of a large nonprofit organization like this,
and do you have like a favorite part, or do you like the fact that 1 minute you can be talking about where the bathrooms are, and then also telling about one of your conservation missions in a foreign country, or the travel, perhaps?
I get this question often because it is such a unique position. People want to know, what is your favorite part? And it depends on the day, honestly. There are few things that can compare to being in a children's hospital and bringing animals in to that environment. Or we have the TV channel that we have in children's hospitals where they get a chance to watch that channel, and then I get to come in and interview these kids. Like, what did you think? What was it like? And to sit and talk with these kids about their favorite animals. And I'm on this programming, so they see me on TV, and now I'm sitting on their bed with them.
Yeah.
Those moments, I just absolutely, they'll make me cry. I'm going to cry right now talking about it. And you can't knock me over for nothing, for a week after something like that happens, because it's just such an uplifting thing to go, I'm just being me, and I can bring that into these people's lives. So that's on the top list of favorites, but so is the quiet, peaceful moments that I am with one of the animals I work with, that it's just me and them. And, just having that depth of relationship with wildlife and animals that I have been so privileged to have. There's nothing that can compare to that. And the best I can say is that if you have a pet at home, a dog or a cat, and you feel that strong connection, and there's just where you can look each other in the eye or whatever, and you just feel like you're understood, and not to say these animals are pets, but that kind of connection is what I'm referring to. That has always been one of my favorite moments, where no matter what kind of day you're having, you just go hang out with one of your buddies and you're good, so I'm just, go ahead.
Well, and that's what was so surprising for me when I worked at the children's zoo, was getting that feeling with reptiles and birds. I had always had it with mammals, anything with fur. But to experience that with a snake, or just things that, I don't know, but I had the ability to get that connection.
No, you're onto something there. Yeah. And that's something I think the general populace that does not work or spend time around these animals is surprised to hear. And those are the stories that I love telling. It's like, actually, no, this snake here has a different affect. It has a different personality than the snake that I have over here coming out next. And I know this because I've spent time with them, and you build those relationships with them. And absolutely, reptiles, birds, amphibians, they all have their own personalities, and they click with certain people, and they don't click with other people, and it really is awesome. Yeah, right. It really is awesome.
And then listening to you talk, it's like I think the underlying theme is how people connect to animals. Not just our domestic pets, but wildlife. So, like we talked about opening up, the impact of the zoo on me. But when you're talking about going into a children's hospital, and some of these illnesses are terminal or whatever, but people light up when you talk about wildlife, or you show them, a handleable animal, and say, hey, look at this hedgehog, like you were saying earlier, something they've never seen before. And you watch people just amazed, whenever I'm at a zoo, wherever it is, and I watch people and the children, and they're like, oh, and their eyes are wide and mouths open, and it's so wildlife. And that's why Angie and I love doing this podcast so much, because we hear it from people from all over the world, how they love to learn about all these different species. So with that being said, and not to take the mood down, but sorry.
It's about to get real. Put on your seatbelt, folks.
We're losing it. I know, that's the thing. We're losing this biodiversity. I mean, right before our eyes. I mean, we're seeing them disappear
at an alarming rate.
Yes. Like you said, northern white rhino, there's 2 females left. It's, Vaquita porpoise, all the ones that are on their way out or almost on their way out. But luckily we have people like you, Rick, fighting and being a spokesperson for that and others. So how do you see your role, not only as spokesperson of the San Diego Zoo or the Wild Animal Park, but your role in educating the masses about this crisis?
Yeah, I think it goes back to what I had said earlier for my own personal mission and a quick job description. We live in a time where it's easy to go from the one hot topic to the next. And I think not too long ago, there was just, I had heard about probably 2 weeks, maybe a week and a half before it became the Twitter topic of the day, of several days. It was the fires in the Amazon. And those fires are still burning.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
But you can go on any social media platform and that topic is done.
Yeah.
It does not exist anymore. But in the moment, it was this cry of how can we not do anything? And I appreciate that passion. And I don't want to come off as if I'm saying we failed because it's still burning.
Right.
No, awareness is super important. And even if it is just a 3-day movement on social media, that's 3 days of awareness that probably hooked some people into getting involved that wouldn't have known about it otherwise. So I don't want it to sound like I'm saying it was bad that it passed so quickly. My point being is that getting messages out to the masses, is about creating that moment on social media or in general of awareness. But then it's what you do with that once you have, created that awareness and you have now created an audience who's like, I want to be involved. What can I do? It's the next steps after that where my role is to find out who in the audience was the passionate ones and who want to join us in dealing with this. And then supporting that and not just saying, click on this to donate, but answer their questions, address their concerns, discuss with them what they think they could do, and essentially not necessarily mentor, but build their abilities or make them aware of their abilities because they're already there in taking action and making a difference. I know in the audiences that I address, whether it's people wandering through the zoo, or it's the TV audience when I'm on Live with Kelly or whatever, whoever listens to this podcast, not everyone in that audience is going to join me in what I do and what I'm passionate about. But if I can get 10% of them, I'm happy as can be. If I can get one, sure, I'll take it. Because and I see the value in that there might be a kid who's all about frogs, and there might be another kid who's all about, tigers. I will tailor my discussion with them for what they're excited about because I don't want to try and convince them to do other things. I want them to follow their passion because that's when they'll make a difference. Is they're passionate about already, so let's feed that and get it going. And that's where my role kind of falls into that, I think.
And in your opinion, in the past couple years, do you think the masses are starting to pay attention? There does seem to be, as you mentioned, some momentum on certain topics in social media, or at least it seems that way. But what is your take on that? Are people starting to pay more attention than they did, say, 5 years ago?
Absolutely. Absolutely. No doubt in my mind that the audience has been reached and is growing. Sure, there's misinformation out there, but I started in this role as spokesperson for this organization temporarily in 2009, full-time 2010. And so let's look at a quick snapshot of social media at that time. Facebook was still kind of getting itself figured out. Twitter had been around, but nobody really knew what to do with it. Everyone was kind of there looking at each other, awkward, sort of cocktail party. And that was really it. MySpace was on the way out.
Good old MySpace.
Instagram didn't even exist yet, right? And so at that time, the way we would reach an audience is we'd go on radio and television shows. We would do print interviews. And we still do that, don't get me wrong. But there was no opportunity for audience feedback. Where in social media now, as social media grew, I could see that there's an opportunity for that feedback, for that discussion, for that conversation about conservation. And so I can say that from the very first time we promoted anti-poaching for elephants to the most recent time, huge difference in the size of the audience that participates. The funds that are being raised for anti-poaching units is higher than it's ever been. We see celebrities now who might have been like, oh yeah, I love animals, now are volunteering to be the face or spokesperson for PSA. Yao Ming, the basketball player, if I said his name right, I hope, he did a whole campaign in China, anti-poaching campaign in China about rhinos and ivory. And that was huge because he is a huge star there. And now as someone they look up to as a true influencer, he made a difference. There was actual data that backed up that after that campaign ran, purchasing of those items dropped significantly in certain demographics as far as age groups, which was basically his audience. Yeah. And so that's really that to me tells me yes. An example I use sometimes is the straws, the whole straw thing. Forever, plastic's been an issue. Forever, straws have been single use, tossed in the trash, pain in the butt as far as any conservation is concerned. And then there was this big uprising to get rid of them. And then you had, well, what's once you get rid of straws going to do? You still have, look, there's plastic here, there's plastic bags. And it's like, yeah, you're right. Mm-hmm. So let's look at those next. It's one step at a time is how we're going to get this done. And yes, so short answer, yes, there's been a big difference and it's improving.
No, that's amazing. And you're right. I think we feel it. We feel that there's, especially the younger generation, the generation that you're out there, reaching. And I know some of the older generation, I got to tip my hat to them too, leading some of these efforts in conservation and policing ourselves and the trash, things like that.
Yep.
Switching gears a little bit, really want to talk more about, San Diego Zoo Global, what they're doing out there, because I think a lot of people don't really understand what zoos are doing in the field. And, we did get to interview your koala team a few months back, and it was amazing talking to them how San Diego sends them to Australia, to actually go in the field and work with these animals and work in their active conservation. So I really want to talk a lot about that today if we can too. So I don't know if you can address kind of what the overall mission is of the zoo and wildlife park, and then kind of some more of the popular conservation efforts that the San Diego Zoo is doing.
That's actually pretty easy, but also challenging. So we have a full-blown mission statement. Essentially, it talks at length about getting people involved with the conservation we're doing around the world. The name San Diego Zoo Global is because we are a global nonprofit organization. Our vision is easier to kind of put across there, and is quite simply put, it's to end extinction. And that's it. And you can look at that and go, yeah, right, you're going to end extinction. Underneath that, we're looking to end extinction one species at a time. We recognize we can't do it all at one time, but we are going to target our efforts very specifically. And as soon as we feel we've gotten to the point that we have done what we can, or the project can be passed on to someone else who can keep it going, we will target another species. It's that simple. We're ending extinction. We are currently located in over I think we have over 100 projects around the world that we're working actively on. And it represents about a little over 40 countries where that's happening. That also includes projects right here in San Diego County. We have plenty of endangered species due to our coastal and desert areas that we are actively doing release programs on, and radio or GPS tracking on, and things like that. So the amount of species, the amount of locations around the world is kind of mind-boggling for some people, because like, wow, I just thought this was a zoo, and our efforts and our work go well beyond the zoo perimeter. Yes, you're welcome to come and have a good time, but recognize that we're doing a lot more than just letting you come and have a good time and learn about animals.
Well, and you actually touch on a really important point, and I'd love to get your opinion on it. Do you think the public in general, so probably maybe not a lot of people listen to this podcast, but we got to get the message out there. But do you think the public in general understands what accredited zoos like San Diego Zoo Global, what they do for animals and conservation?
It is. This comes from my personal experience. The answer is no. My personal experience is usually when you have an opportunity to briefly tell someone the extracurricular activities we have outside of running a zoo and a safari park, people are dumbfounded. Right. They have no idea. And a lot of that does not come from us ignoring the need to tell people. We are always banging that drum. It is more challenging to get that voice or that message out there in a world that is filled with so much information in general that is, honestly, we send out press releases all the time about what we're doing, but it's usually not. Yeah, and I appreciate it. But it's honestly not until maybe a baby giraffe happens that it gets picked up by the news. So we're sending out those press releases, but the general public isn't going to see it in the media if the media decides it's not a story that's going to gain traction for them. And that's the nature of running a media company. I get it. I'm not complaining. I'm just saying that we try to let people know what we do. But in general, I think most people are surprised, A, that we're a nonprofit organization. We always have been. And then B, that we do millions upon millions of dollars worth of work beyond keeping a functioning zoo.
Well, and then Rick, to follow up with that, because it's just so interesting to me, and it's something I'm very passionate about. And Chris and I both with this podcast, it's one of our missions to help tell the story about what zoos do behind the scenes, and in front of the scenes, of course, as well. So if there was all the money in the world, or if you could have it your way, what could we do to change that, to help educate more people about zoos and their conservation mission, and that going to your local accredited zoo act and spending your money there actually can help animals in the wild? What could be done, or what else can Chris and I do, or any of our listeners out there?
I think the realistic answer that what can be done now is more important than addressing what could be done if we had all this money to do something. I think telling the stories, doing podcasts like this, sharing on social media. One of the big things I get pushback on, because I do a lot on Twitter and Instagram and Facebook, and I get every now and then I get a naysayer that says, "Oh, yeah, because posting about it here on social media is going to make a difference for rhinos." And I'm like, well, let's have that discussion, because it will. Because if I have enlightened of the X amount of people that follow me, if 20 of them share what I posted and or read it and then want to tell others about it, that's an amplification. And we know for a fact, especially in conservation, especially when you have to work with other people in conservation that aren't necessarily conservationists, awareness drives change. It is a huge factor. And so it's a matter of finding different avenues to tell the stories, and that's why I love social media so much, is that it's an opportunity, unfiltered. There's no producer or director or programming director saying, it's not really good enough news. I'm getting it out there, and my audience responds, and they share it with their audience, whether it's, just Aunt Josephine, who follows them on Facebook. Yeah. Maybe Aunt Josephine had no idea rhinos were going to go extinct, and now she's more apt to do something about it. And it's just, and if there was a ton of money, then I would say we'd go out and buy tons of space on social media to broadcast it even further. We would create curriculum that goes into high schools, because I think that's where we lose a lot of our general audience as a zoological facility and zoos in general. We have families that bring little ones in. We have elementary schools that come and do field trips, and then they get to high school and they're gone until they have their own kids, and they come back. And I hear all the time, I haven't been here since I was in sixth grade, and that would be where I would spend a large chunk of money, is creating curriculum and programs in high schools that are specifically about conservation and zoos and the work that they do.
Yes, I love it. Thank you.
Yeah, no, that's not, that is the audience, right? Like, you talk to these teenagers, and I've been doing it the past year. Shout out to Ari and her friends. And I'm like, so what do you guys think? Are you even aware of what's going on out there? And they have no clue, and I did see TikTok the other day. That's like the new one. And you had the giraffe, that was great. Right.
Yep.
Yeah.
I'm doing it. Yeah. Because it's where the eyeballs are. I don't think I've got, I don't have the right recipe for TikTok.
It's a different platform.
Because it is a different platform. But I tell you what, though, I'm going to be there. And even if it's just one video or one clip that takes off there to get people to go, oh, that's funny, or that's good. And then if I get, one person that clicks over to my profile and says, who is this guy? And then all of a sudden they're like, oh, this is cool. I had no idea. Yeah. That's a win. And so, you will always find me wherever the eyeballs are, because that's where I need to be to tell my message, to make sure it's being seen. Otherwise, why shout down an empty cannon?
And I know we have them. I think Gavin up in Canada, he's a high school guy that just emailed Angie and I the other day. So, they're out there, but you're right. That generation, once they get to that age and they start doing other things, and it's important to educate them and get them excited about conservation. Absolutely. And it's no fault of theirs. It's our responsibility to reach them, because it's the
one thing as a communicator I always talk about in class is that you have to understand your audience so you can meet them where they are. And if we are going to keep doing the same style of messaging and expect people as they mature and change and their lifestyles change to stick around for where our old school messaging is, we're sadly mistaken as communicators. We have to meet them where they are. We have to adjust for the teenage years. We have to adjust for the early college years and understand what they're going through in life and where their priorities are. So we reach them at the right time, at the right place with messaging, and not try to get them to accept what we've been saying when they were in elementary school, because it doesn't work.
Well, I think one of the things I really wanted to bring up too are some of the lesser known conservation efforts. And I know we're going to jump into the zoo show that you had on Animal Planet, but one of the episodes was re-releasing burrowing owls. It was one of the species we covered, I don't know, like 30 or more like 50 pods ago. But I was really surprised, and I was like, oh, and there's San Diego releasing them back in the wild. So are there some of those other lesser known species? I know there are, but that people, should be, or maybe just aren't aware of, that you're fighting hard to, like you said, end extinction for them.
Yeah, absolutely. Our quick compare and contrast, our white rhino project has gotten a lot of news, as it should, because it's incredibly unique and special and huge. And it's a megafauna, so it's a very obvious species. But to your point, the burrowing owl, the mountain yellow-legged frog is another one of our projects. And there are countless other small, even butterfly projects, honestly, that are here in San Diego or that other zoos are working on, that are no less amazing and impressive in the science behind it, the work, the amount of hours going into it. But you try and put that in front of the media like it's a butterfly. I see those in my backyard. Or it's a frog. I see those, down by the creek where I go fishing. Unfortunately, perception isn't quite there on how important these projects are. But yes, to your point, there are hundreds of other conservation projects. I've got some friends in the Hogle Zoo in Utah, and they've got a great project up there with some toads they're working on. And, our staff with the mountain yellow-legged frog, the burrowing owl project, there's Pacific pocket mice. These guys are no bigger than those pink pencil erasers that you used to use in elementary school, and they get the name pocket mouse, not because they're small and fit in your pocket, which is what I honestly thought when I first heard about them. They have these dry pockets. It's not actually in the mouth. Dry pockets on the side of the mouth where they stash grass seed, which is what they live off of. And of course, if the grass seed got moist, it'd get ruined. So these dry pockets, and we have a whole project where not only we studied the heck out of them and their breeding rituals and their mating behavior, and now we're making more, and then we're doing release programs along the California coast. All these projects just truly fascinating, and the list can go on and on. There's countless ones that are lesser known than some of the megafauna we work with as well.
And do you want to highlight the Northern White Rhino Project or any other major ones going on for some of our listeners out there?
Well, certainly. I think, we have, three come to mind that are probably the most famous. Obviously, the California condor. When I was, I remember still to this day, clear as a bell, the cover of the National Geographic magazine that came out when the last ones were brought in from the wild. There were 22 left in the 80s. And that is just seared into my brain, the cover of that magazine and what it represented and what the story inside. And, when I was going through college then and came to visit what was then called the Wild Animal Park, now the Safari Park, there was, you could buy these shirts that said CRESS, which was, I think, Center for Reproduction of Endangered Species. And there's a big condor across it, and that was really the famous one. And the science behind taking 22 condors, they didn't just take 22 and say, okay, here's a boy, here's a girl, start making more. There was a full DNA study done on the entire collection, who's related to whom, how many generations are they apart, all the things. And now, of course, the other side of it, there's over 400 of them in the population, half of that flying free in the wild. And the next big one for us was giant pandas. And that 40 years of giant panda, 20 some odd years of giant panda research, 40 years total of conservation. Now they're off the endangered species list, So it's just one thing after another. And now we're looking at the northern white rhino. I was so dang lucky. I got to go to Kenya. I got to meet all three of them before the male passed away. It was such a blender full of emotions to go out there to Opejida and know that I'm looking at the last 3 of that kind, but also to be so excited to be there to see the last 3 of that kind. It was just, It was such a weird moment. I remember we got there right before sunset. It was just so dramatic, and it was just beautiful. And our organization, we have what's called the Frozen Zoo. And there's over 1,000 species represented in the Frozen Zoo. This is a cryogenically frozen bank of cells. And in there we have the representation, I believe, I want to say it's either, I don't know why my brain does this, it's either 12 or 18. Either way, it's less than 20 individuals representative of the northern white rhino. And we have skin cells, we have hair cells, we have some, other reproductive cells, different tissue samples, but we don't have the complete package to put them together in vitro and say, make a baby. So we're looking at the science of stem cells to make that happen. And so while our scientists are working on that in the lab, we in the field, we have 6 females that were of southern white rhinos. So for those who don't know, the northern white rhino and southern white rhino are incredibly close, but different enough to be considered subspecies. And we know this through DNA studies that have been done. They mapped out the whole thing like, okay, there's enough of a difference. So we know that if we impregnated a southern white rhino, we would have a half and half. It wouldn't be if we impregnated them. With the semen from a northern white rhino, you'd have then a hybridization. So what we're doing with these southern white rhino, these females, we're mapping out the reproductive system, which has never been done in the species. It's not as easy as people think.
I know. I've ultrasounded them before. It's
okay.
It's a workout.
So yeah, and not only a workout, it's just that it's such a unique uterus. It's such a unique track and way the ovaries. Yeah, it's just, I love biology and animals, but to listen to our reproductive physiologists and scientists that do this work, I'm just blown away. So long and the short of it, because it's a long story. This is our plan is we are making sure these females are reproductively viable. We are using southern white rhino male semen to impregnate, to make sure their body goes through the cycle properly, and to make sure we understand the hormone cycle of when they're ready to receive. Then, once that science is perfected, and once we have that all figured out, we will then create in vitro or in the test tube a southern white from an egg and a sperm. We'll create that embryo, and that embryo will be planted then into a surrogate female unrelated. So the goal is to perfect the surrogate program through southern white rhinos. Once that's perfected, then we'll take the very precious and rare tissue that we do have of the northern white rhinos. We will make the sperm and the egg. We will make that embryo of a true northern white rhino from that the cell lines and that genetics, and that will then be put into a southern white rhino female as a surrogate. So when that baby's born, it's a true northern white rhino. And that is our goal, and that is the science we are currently doing at this safari park.
So incredible.
Right.
So exciting.
Yeah, and that's stuff like, Angie and I studied back in our academic days, and, some of Angie's work with the southern white rhino. It's worth saying, too, for people, that's the last-ditch effort to save a species. That's not our goal. What San Diego Zoo does is try to maintain, like Rick was talking about the condors, keeping a viable population under human care, grow it, and then re-release them. Like you said, the Przewalski horse, black-footed ferret, California condor, bison. We can keep going on and on and on.
Yeah.
So, but also, you're talking about the science fiction stuff is still going on behind the scenes that a lot of people
it's
don't
just
know.
really
so
progressive.
It's really fun to talk about and hopefully bringing a species back. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's not science fiction anymore.
No, it's not. It's reality, right?
It was 5 years ago, but no, it's real. I've seen some amazing things in what they're doing there and what they're perfecting. And it's mind blowing. And I give talks quite often about this project. And sometimes I get questions back. It's like, why in the world would any organization think it's a good idea to spend that much money and time when there's only 2 left? They're probably going to go extinct. If this program doesn't work, they're done, and you've just dumped millions of dollars into it. And the simple answer to that is, then tell me when is the right time? When there's 100 left, when there's 500 left, because guess what? There's rhino species out there that only have 100 left. There's some that have only 400 and some left. Right. And so our vision on this is we start here. And this process will help us also dramatically understand the other rhino species, and we can perfect the process for them as well. And even if it does not result in saving the species, the amount of information we will have found out about this process will be completely applicable and something that we can build on then for the other species.
Yeah,
absolutely. And obviously as scientists, we know that, my running saying is it's not called search, it's called research, because you have to keep redoing it to get better at it. And a lot of times one answer, you end up having 4 more questions, but you need to do it in order, as you mentioned, to get it down. And if, gosh forbid, the northern whites can't be saved, we have all these steps forward in case we need them for another species. And
right, exactly. And we can even point to the southern white rhino. It wasn't that long ago the northern white rhino was still roaming free in the northern portions of Africa. And then we all woke up one day and said, hey, there's no more left. And the only ones left were in zoos. And that happened rapidly due to aggressive poaching. We could see that happen with what we think is a safe population of southern white rhinos too. So again, the path we're on for this is focused on the northern white rhino, but does not mean it won't be very important for the species in the near future.
No, right. It's a great point. And I think that kind of leads into the next topic we're going to kind of talk about is how important accredited zoos like San Diego Zoo Global are to conservation. And talking about that high school population just a month ago, I had a pretty lengthy survey that a high school student sent me, and I'm going to write a paper and I'm trying to figure out why zoos matter. I think they should go away. And it really had some really well thought out questions. And so I took the time, it took me about an hour, and I really took the time to write it out and write my responses on why I feel, my opinion, and it's a learned opinion, being involved in research and science, why zoos matter. And he wrote back and he's like, wow, I was going to write this against zoos, but I completely changed his mind. Completely. So from your perspective and your experience doing this the last couple decades, how important are zoos to conservation? And then again, how important is San Diego Zoo Global to conservation? I think we've been leading up to this. It's kind of an easy question, or answer, but I wanted to get your take on that.
Yeah, I think, between us, probably between your listeners and most of my fans, it is a simple answer. Yes, zoos are important to conservation. But I think anybody who's paying attention knows the average zoo person or zoo guest is coming to the zoo to have a nice day, see some animals, spend some time with family or on their own or on a date. In fact, a friend of mine who works for a company that works with a lot of museums, they ran a study a few years back, and they polled people as they were leaving, asking them why they came to the museum that day. And it was about 75% said they're coming there to have a good time, something to do for the day, something interesting. And about 25% were, well, we're here to learn something. We thought it'd be good to see this and learn about that, or I have a report for school. Then you do the same poll to the employees asking, why do guests come? And 75% they're here to learn something. And about 25%, well, they're here to just have a good time. There's a disconnect there, obviously. And I bring that up because it's a study that I'm aware of about museums. I believe it's a similar situation for zoos as well. I believe the general population shows up to enjoy themselves. And then they leave from our exit polls having learned something. We have a lot of exit polls that we do to see if our message is reaching our audience on grounds. And most people are surprised to hear about the level of challenges wildlife in general faces today. There's a lot of noise out there in media, and not everybody is on social media following a zoo or a conservation organization. And the other part of it is we can't just constantly beat them over the head with the challenges the wildlife face, because it can be very overwhelming and depressing. Yes. Emotional burnout is a real thing in our field, and because it can be very challenging and overwhelming. And so zoos are important to raise that awareness. It is our responsibility to raise that awareness. The role that zoos play in conservation is huge, and it's hard for us to get that message out because a lot of times media does not want to pick it up. That's why podcasts like this are so important, because you guys are covering stories, like you mentioned, the black-footed ferret and burrowing owls and vaquita. Most places you go in America, if you say vaquita, people are like,
"Is that a taco?" What? Yeah,
they don't even know what it is. And to no fault to those who are trying so desperately to do something about their impending extinction, it's just a matter of there's so much going on out there, and the role zoos play. We also look at it as it's our responsibility to share sort of the respect we have for animals, and the honor that we have to spend time with them. And so our hope is that perhaps when a family's out camping or even down at the beach, to spend the day there, the thought process behind your conduct in that space, as far as what you leave behind or don't leave behind, or when you see wildlife, to respectfully watch it from a distance. Things of that nature are important as well. It's not just this foreign country far away that has these exotic striped animals. It's what's in your own backyard. It's whatever's downstream is just as important. And zoos teach that lesson as well.
And then, Rick, what do you think is going to be the role that zoos will play in the future? Or what are the changes in the industry, and how are they being reflected in the zoo?
I think it's pretty easy to look back and point to what zoos were in the early 1900s. You look back in the history of zoos, right. There's always been some level of conservation in there, oddly enough. I don't think a lot of people know that, but as humans, we've always cared about animals. Yes, we're also very curious, and sometimes it's a matter of showing up to just look at them. And I think there was a time you can look at in the early 1900s that zoos were a place to come look at animals. And now the modern zoo is a place where you come to learn about them. And the modern zoo is the place where conservation starts. We do a lot of fundraising in our organization, and we know very well that the charismatic animals get attention. Charismatic animals are the ones that are going to get people interested in sharing the funds they have made that they don't need for living, that they can share with us so we can, do our work. And we were trying to fundraise. Our children's is currently under construction. It's a big dirt pile with a bunch of tractors right now. It looks like a giant play yard. And it was brought up in one of the meetings I attended that it's really hard to fundraise for a location and not fundraise for elephants or for rhinos. And I spoke up and I said, then where our message is wrong, because having worked in the children's zoo, I can tell you that's where conservation starts.
Yes.
Children's zoo is where that aha moment happens for so many people. So many scientists, conservationists, or people in the zoo world say, oh, I remember I was at the Sea Lion show and this happened. Or I remember I was at my local zoo and this happened. And they have that aha moment. I have seen that aha moment so many times as a children's zookeeper where a child has that moment for the first time that they think the animal looked at them.
Sure.
Whether the animal did or not doesn't matter. It's that, looked right at me. It swam by and looked at me, whatever. And they feel that connection for the first time. That's where conservation starts, right there in the children's zoo. And that person could be the next whomever that does
Jane
whatever,
Goodall.
whether they're a keeper, whether they're Jane. Yeah, right, exactly. And so for me, the modern zoo, there is no disconnect between zoology, zookeepers, zoo work, and conservation. Conservation and zoology have become, or I should say, conservation and zoos, the modern zoo, have become so intertwined that at this point, I don't believe one will happen without the other successfully.
It's so true. And when we, back when we talked to Corbin Maxey, we did an episode on why zoos matter. And I was telling the story as a young kid at the San Diego Zoo, walking, and I believe it was by the old gorilla exhibit. And it was like things that come from the rainforest. And, here's all of this stuff that we get from the rainforest. And by the way, the rainforest is going away in the Amazon. And this is back last century. We won't go back to, do the math. But
before we redid the center portion of the heart of the zoo. I know what you're talking about.
As a child or as a young adult, I think it was I was around 10 years old. That stuck with me, and that stuck with me since. And here I am today, reaching tens of thousands of people around the world, talking conservation. So you're right. You don't know who you're impacting when they walk by and see that signage or see your social media posts, things like that. And that's why, parents listening, take your kids. It makes a huge impact on them. Shout out to Quinn. There's another of our listeners that I know. This podcast particularly has had a positive effect on that young woman's life. So switching gears again, I know we've been dying to talk about this one, and that is the zoo show that's been on Animal Planet. Yeah, it was amazing, fun to watch.
Well, yeah, it's a good lead into the impact. Yeah, talk about making impact.
And reaching millions. I mean, millions of viewers that get to watch that show. And I thought it was really well done, talking about the conservation message, the heartbreak, of animals passing away, the male lion. God, I get chills just thinking about that scene. I was just like those poor keepers and so I guess the big question is, how'd that go for San Diego Zoo Global?
It was amazing. It was awesome. It was terrifying. It was a bigger bite of apple than we thought we took. And it was a lot of what we expected. Our organization, we work a lot with TV production companies, but mostly on a media level. So in my time in my experience here, we have not hosted a full-blown TV production like that. We have hosted, say, the Today Show in Al Roker for 2 days for a 5-minute bit for the following week. We've hosted a travel channel thing or a weather channel thing where they're on grounds all day and we work with them all day or maybe 2 days. We've never had, in my time, again, I started in 2000, we had not hosted a production company of this size. So we had a team of 6 or 7 on the production company side at the safari park. At the same time, we had a team of the same size at the zoo. And we shot Monday through Friday, 10-hour days or more, all weather, January through May. And it was a lot. It was a lot of work. And my biggest concern, when my chief marketing officer came to me and said, I want to put you in charge of this project, what do you think? My first thought was, how is this going to impact my keepers? Because having been a keeper for so long, I know they have a full day.
And then some.
And I know they have their right. And their passion and their responsibility is to their animals. How is this going to impact their day? What are we going to do about that impact? And then when I went around all the different departments, almost all of the departments, I told them, my biggest concern is how this is going to impact your teams and your work. So please speak up or tell me. And then every day of production, every team we came in contact with, multiple teams per day, is how are we doing on time? How is your day? What can we, because at the end of it, what I wanted to see, and it's completely selfish, I wanted at the end of this project for our teams to look back on that and go, wow, that was really cool. I hope they come back for season 2.
Sure. Yeah.
Instead of, I'm so glad this is over.
Yes.
And it could go either way. It really, because you have a large crew of people coming in and changing your day, and for as much as you saw on TV, you were watching with commercials about 46 minutes of television per episode. There were 8 episodes or 9, maybe 9 episodes. Mm-hmm. And we filmed for months, 10-hour days, Monday through Friday. You can imagine how much work we put into this to make that TV show. And so I was very concerned about how our staff would be impacted, and I'm happy to report back to the end this far out now. We finished filming in May, the season's run through, and everyone is thrilled with it. And that's really where my concern was. The other concern, of course, was making sure our stories were being told, making sure that the conservation made it in there, because a lot of times TV shows, they want what's going to make for good TV. And sometimes conservation doesn't make for good TV. Mm-hmm. We know that because a lot of times our stories don't get picked up in the media. So for us, it was, how can we make sure the production company gets what they need for a good TV show and still get our stories out there? And I think they did a great job. I think it was a wonderful blend of, the burrowing owl story and the passion our keepers have and taking care of an individual animal up until their last days, or taking care of a youngster who had a rough start, and everything in between. I was there for filming. I saw the rough cuts. I saw the final cuts, and I still enjoyed watching it on TV with my family. So, they did a great job. And I really, hats off to the production team, hats off to Animal Planet for putting this as their spotlight programming now. I mean, the zoo, filmed at the Bronx, is 4 seasons in now, I think. The aquarium at Georgia Aquarium did a season. They announced their season 2's coming up. We're going to be filmed soon. The Irwins, basically, it's all the same kind of general format, but it's the unique stories of these facilities. And the beauty of this program is it does do what we talked about earlier, which was it starts to crack into that public that zoos are more than just a place to go and enjoy the animals. This is all the amazing work going on behind the scenes that you have no idea unless you work there.
On exhibit, right? That are involved in conservation programs, the condors.
Yeah.
That baby cassowary.
The condor program. We have employees that have never been allowed to be up there.
I was like, oh my gosh. I just, the moving around. It was an amazing program. It was an amazing program.
Well, Rick, I have to ask, I'm dying to know, will there be a season 2 of the Zoo Show on Animal Planet?
We're dying to know too.
Fair enough.
Right. So, right now, all the signs are pointing to there probably will be, but there's still a lot of higher level business stuff that's being tended to. Yeah. So we have not heard officially if they're going to call for a season 2 or not. We are prepared for it and we are hopeful, which makes me happy because that means we did right by our staff internally, the first go around. So we're just waiting. I mean, I don't know, maybe by the time this airs, there'll be an announcement, but as of right now, nothing official.
Okay. Well, we're crossing our fingers for you and definitely
thanks.
We'll be watching. And of course, on our show notes, we'll put up links and make sure that everybody listening is fully aware of the Zoo Show on Animal Planet and check out past episodes if you haven't, and potentially look forward to some new ones. We'll see.
I hope so.
Mm-hmm.
And so with that being said, Rick, you do get to go on some of these other shows, like you said, the morning shows and the late night shows. You got to read Ron Burgundy. I watched that live. That was awesome.
I watched that too. That was amazing. Oh my gosh. That was so fun.
So, but, doing these shows and we've talked to Corbin Maxey and some others. Do you feel like you're able to get some sort of your conservation message out there?
Well, it depends how they edit.
Right.
So so a lot of these shows are live, and animals are the feel good. So we're usually pushed to the very end of the show, and we're told sometimes at the top of the show, oh, you'll have 9 minutes, and then by the time the live shows run through, you might be down to 4. Mm-hmm. And the producers want as many animals on as possible, and we have to find a point of where we are not challenging what we can do safely with the animals, but also give the producers as much of what they want so we get invited back.
Sure. Mm-hmm.
And so it's this delicate ongoing negotiation and dance when it comes to these live shows. And, getting your conservation message out doesn't always happen in full, but even if, and I train people on this when we talk about media training, even if when I first walk on with an African penguin and they're like, oh, it's so cute. Look at that. It's like it's wearing a tuxedo. I'll first thing out of my mouth, I'll just make up a name. This is Betty, our African penguin. And the reason we're here is because this is a critically endangered species that zoos are working together in South Africa to create safe nesting areas for them. And, and maybe a few other quick facts, because I know I'm going to interrupt real quick about it just pooped or something else happened or it smells like fish, because that's what they want for content, is that fun sort of thing that their audience is going to enjoy. And I understand that. And it's up to me to not ignore that, but I also want to slide in my messaging where I can. For the most part, I've been doing this long enough. I know I have to get that messaging in up front and early. Otherwise, you can't work it in naturally. You have to open with it. Sometimes, I absolutely love Kelly Ripa. She genuinely loves animals. She genuinely wants to hear. She'll argue with her producer to give me more time. I mean, it's, she's great. And so I know with her, I can open with my conservation messaging, and then we'll have some fun facts, and she'll naturally say, so what else is going on with the species? Mm-hmm. And so that's always a treat. The moment I was on the Late Late Show, James Corden's show with Ron Burgundy, that was a taped piece. And so the challenge I have with taped pieces is I can get my conservation message out, but if the producer afterwards wants to narrow it down by editing, once it airs, it's just a funny segment. Now, I am pleased with the fact that there were several times the conservation message was left in there. There were some talking points throughout that fun, goofy, amazing segment that we did get some messaging in there about wildlife and respecting wildlife and the challenges these animals face. A lot of it didn't get in there, but a lot of it did. So I was very pleased with how that segment turned out as well.
It was awesome. I thought it, because it moves pretty quick, but it is fun to be engaging too. And people obviously do connect to animals, but connecting to humor or real life situations is always a great way to go too. So, and like you said, we just have to keep trying, because you never know. There's that one kid that's staying up really late at night, probably my 5-year-old, to watch it. And, no, he wasn't up that time, but you know what I'm saying.
But it's on YouTube,
right?
It's on YouTube. Mm-hmm. It circulates in social media, and that's the other thing too. Is that I look at that James Corden audience. You look at those videos on YouTube, and there's millions and millions of viewers that are watching his videos. Mm-hmm. And so, and you go down through those comments, and there are people going, wow, this zookeeper's keeping up with Ron Burgundy. It's amazing. I go into the comments and say thanks and try and engage with, I will pick these people off in the comments and start engaging them, because that's where my opportunity lies. Some person who had never heard of me before, who has no idea who I am and I have no way to reach them, has now made it an opportunity for me to reach them and engage, and we can, all of a sudden they're following me on other social media platforms, and now we're having a conversation about, whatever. And that's where the value is. It may be in the moment, it's a ha-ha, sure, you got a message up, but no one's listening because they're laughing. But then it's the follow-up. It's that one person in the audience, that one person watching on TV, the person on YouTube, wherever the clip may surface. I'm scouring through those comments, because my job is to pick those people out and go, yes, let's talk about animals. Let's talk about conservation. And that's where I live.
We are in such we're so lucky to be in an age where these daytime or late night talk shows is the clips will air on, like you said, either YouTube or even on the home station's website. And so they can be viewed again, where that's novel. When I was growing up, that wasn't the case. If you didn't hit your VHS and record it, it was gone, right? So, and I think that definitely does work in our benefit too. And like you said, then you can engage in real time and answer questions.
The follow-up engagements. Awesome. Yes.
Well, we have 2 more questions. So getting towards the end, we know we got to let you go.
Sure.
So Rick, I always like to ask this of all of our guests, and it's harkens back to when we started doing this podcast and getting different opinions from people from different walks of life, where you have a Sonarto out in Java, working with camera traps, looking for tigers. And then we have Greg Rasmussen doing African painted dogs, to, all the researchers and scientists that we've talked to are spokespeople. So this one, I'm really interested to get your take on it. And that is, do we as a species have a moral obligation to save these endangered species?
Yep.
Okay, thank you.
It's that easy. You can definitely deep dive into that, and absolutely we have a moral obligation. From just the idea that you look at us as a species on this planet, and the way we have restructured and designed the surface of this planet to meet our needs. The fact that in such a short period of time, as far as the timeline of this planet goes, we have gone from dressing in pelts to changing the temperature inside of our buildings to suit our needs, no matter what the temperature is outside. We have an amazing potential to do great things, and we have proven that. When it comes to moral obligations, we have a moral obligation to ourselves, to our families, to our communities, and that extends into the surrounding habitats and the animals that we share this planet with. From a moral side of it, how good is our ability to change the world to suit our needs if in the process we destroy the very thing we are standing on? And the living creatures around us? What have we done with ourselves when species like the rhino face extinction, or even tadpoles and frogs face extinction, or trees of certain species face extinction because of what we've done? So yes, our moral obligation is there. And you can then take the perspective of a scientific obligation. We know very well in our scientific studies the interconnection that all species have, whether it's a food chain or a food web or whatever cycle of life you want to look at. And to think that one or two going on the wayside to benefit our needs because we don't want to change a little bit of what we do or how we do it is certain destruction. And it's not certain destruction of the earth, because the earth will be here until it falls into this, until it falls into the sun. It is certain destruction of ourselves. And we have to be aware that scientifically, we are creating a situation where we will not be able to sustain ourselves much longer if we keep going down this path. I truly believe that we can and we will change that path. And the last point that I want to bring up on this line of thought process is, I had a conversation with a very religious friend of mine, and his point to me, his argument to me was, look, God put us on this planet, and he made this planet for us to enjoy and to use for our needs. And I'm not as well versed in his religion as he is. But my counterpoint to that was, we are also challenged with being good stewards of what God has made for us. And so even from a religious aspect, you can look at it, whether you are strictly in science, strictly in religion, or human moral, or ethics, or even just somewhere in between. There is not a compass anywhere, moral or otherwise, that doesn't point to the need for conservation and taking good care of our planet.
I will never ask that question again. That's like the most complete, perfect answer I've ever heard. Like, seriously, like doing this for 2 years. Holy
I got
smokes,
goosebumps. It was beautiful.
Wow.
Yes.
Wow. That is, the bar has been set. It's all future guests.
Okay. Well,
wow.
I look forward
to
someone reaching that bar and going past it, because
that's powerful.
That's why we set bars.
Yes. Well, and so Rick, you've got to tell us how our listeners, and your listeners can find out more of this amazing and wise zoo animal conservation education platform that you have, and how can we support your work at the San Diego Zoo?
Well, certainly. I mean, I'm all over social media at Zookeeper Rick, but it's just my voice. It's my thoughts. Yes, I take it from the position of spokesperson for the organization, but also my own personal passion for wildlife and conservation is voiced in there as well. For the organization, I strongly encourage visiting the website endextinction.org. That is sort of the first step portal, if you will, into all the conservation stuff we do. And it's always updated and changing. So go back and visit often. And then, of course, we try to be, as we talked about earlier, we need to be where the audience is. We need to be where the eyeballs are. So please search for us on your favorite social media platform. And if you don't have one, if you don't do social media, you only like doing podcasts, then keep listening to podcasts like this that connect you to people like me. Go to websites for organizations that do the work. You can go to our San Diego Zoo website. In all honesty, our San Diego Zoo website is geared more towards someone who's going to come visit the zoo. But on there are links to our conservation work. There are links to how you can do conservation work right from your own home with our citizen science projects. I think in today's day and age, the quickest and easiest way to connect is through websites and social media. You'll find us there because we have a lot of great stories to share.
Oh, wonderful. And we will definitely be putting all the links on our show notes and on our social media platforms as well. And as always, we always encourage anybody listening to this podcast, one of the quickest, easiest things you can do that takes a millisecond is share. Share this episode. I'm sure one of your cousins or friends or aunts or uncles probably hasn't heard of Zookeeper Rick. They've most likely heard of the San Diego Zoo, but your message and the way that you tell it and the way that you share it and how educated you are and inspiring you are, you're fun to follow. I follow you on social media, and I learn a lot all the time, and it's very engaging and of education, of course, but also fun as well. And so I just try it out and tell a friend about it, because it definitely you won't be disappointed. That's for sure.
Yeah, absolutely. And to that point of the need for sharing this information on social media and whether it's a share button or a like or a heart or a comment or just telling somebody about it. I sometimes hear, especially with like the rhino conservation stuff, is like, look, it's not happening here. Me sharing it to my high school friends isn't going to do anything. And the reality is the challenges of wildlife trafficking that rhinos face with horns and everything else. U.S. is the second largest market for wildlife trafficking and black market items. So you actually sharing here in the United States can raise awareness that's, that little trinket there or that little, elixir you think is supposed to do something. Maybe not. Maybe do make a better choice, have a thought process about that. And like I said earlier, we have seen the results of campaigns like that making a difference in how money is being spent. And that's really where the challenge is. We have to stop people from wanting to buy these things to stop the poaching issue.
Yes, no, exactly. Very, very good point. Wow. And Rick, before I let you go, I have to ask you one last question.
Please do.
Are you hiring?
No, they're not hiring. They're not hiring. I looked.
That's funny. I was going to ask you guys if you need a sidekick for your podcast.
Oh yeah. Well, hey, let's do
I think,
a little.
Angie, you can come take my job. I'll come take yours.
Okay.
We're good.
I love everything about that.
I'll just drive to San Diego. We'll just record from La Jolla.
Yeah.
There you go.
Well, we're always I've just had a blast today, and we are always looking for extra ideas and extra help, especially on some of the more challenging topics when we do special episodes on either poaching or accredited zoos and things like that. So you are now among us, my friend.
Yes.
And
right on. No, it's great. And I really appreciate you guys reaching out to me. What you guys do, I've listened to your podcast, the people you've had on, it's amazing. And I really am glad and excited to hear you guys are looking at the future, doing more and continue to do what you do, because really, again, this type of media is the way to get this information out there. So thank you.
Oh, thank you, Rick, so much. Yeah. It's been a pleasure.
And you guys can't I want to preface this. You can hire Angie, but she can't quit the podcast. I will chase her down.
Fair enough.
But bring her from Florida to California. Bring her to the real Sunshine State. And,
yes.
I would be quite tickled pink if her and John moved out.
You guys, I'm sure you don't have any mosquitoes there, right? It's nice and dry.
Not many. We have some.
Okay.
Oh. They're much smaller. They're much smaller than Florida, I tell you what. And they're fewer.
Oh my gosh.
But it does sound like John's got a pretty sweet gig out there too. So that'd be tough to get him away from there.
And I'm going to set you guys up too. So we would love to have you over at the Santa Fe College Teaching Zoo to inspire the next generation as you do.
Yeah, fun story. I've never been out there. I have been in touch with a few people who have gone through the program, and I hear it's an excellent program. And whenever I talk about Moorpark, I always try to talk about Santa Fe Community College, because obviously sometimes it's easier for someone to go to Florida versus California or whatever. Mm-hmm. And so it's one of those things where I want to make sure they both get their due, because it's a hard business to get into, and programs like that are very
really
important.
helpful to get that. And as we all know, what are the 3 P's? You need patience, persistence, and professionalism. That's the one that I clearly have the hardest one with.
I don't know why I couldn't remember that one.
But yes, well, oh my gosh, this has been amazing. We're for sure going to do again. And yes, thank you for all the work you do. Of course, all the amazing work that San Diego Zoo Global does as a whole. It's a pleasure to be in your company, and we definitely look forward to more talks in the future for sure.
Yes, thank you. Hometown Zoo, big fan, huge fan. And, I'm definitely coming back to the zoo here soon to walk the grounds again. Actually, I'm going to go to the Wild Animal Park next time. But thank you so much, Rick. And we'll definitely please have you on when you're not so busy again, and talk about some of the stuff you're doing and San Diego Zoo Global's doing. But thank you again so much.
Yeah, my pleasure. And I do want to say, because I know your podcast goes all over the place, as much as we've been focusing on the San Diego Zoo and San Diego Zoo Global and everything we do at the Safari Park, I can't stress enough for your listeners, please go support your local zoo. We all work together. We could not do the work we do in this organization without other zoos around the country working together. Odds are animals that are in your local zoo
Absolutely.
have some connection to us or vice versa. So if you aren't as fortunate as Chris to be able to come down and walk around the safari park on any given day, please go visit and support your local zoo. We cannot do this work alone. So that's I'll sign off with that. Thank you guys so much for having me, and I look forward to working with you guys again in the future.
Thank you.